Good morning, Year 6. Today we're learning about formal and informal language. Our work today is to learn the difference between what is formal and informal language and when we use the two and how we create them. So first of all, when we're talking about the formality of a language, we call it a register. So we say that has a formal register or an informal register. We create the register, the formality of the sentence based on our language that we choose to use and the grammar that we choose to use. So I'll read through the first example here. I wish he'd just lay off me has an informal register. I wish he would not disturb me has a more formal register. Think about how those two sentences are different. What language have they used that's different? What grammar have they used that's different? Our register will depend on the situation and the audience. So, for example, if we're at home talking to our families, we might use a more informal register. If we're at school talking to Mrs. Flynn, we'd use a more formal, and even more so if we were, say, on Mount Olympus talking to a god or goddess. Pause here and read through these examples, please. So, the appropriate register we should use is very dependent on the situation we're in and the audience we're communicating with. We will most often have a more formal register when we write. Also, if you're in a formal situation, if you're addressing a group of people you don't know or you're writing to someone important, that's another situation where you might use a more formal register. Again, pause and read through the slide. Situations would use an informal register could be in everyday conversation or when we're writing on social media, and it's most often used when we're speaking. So Royden's really clever because he uses an informal register when he writes dialogue between characters, because that then gives the effect when you read it that it's something that's being said. One way we can influence the register of a sentence is by the vocabulary that we choose. When we use higher order vocabulary, our sentences sound more formal. When we use words that are easier to understand, that are more widely known, it makes our sentences more informal. Another way we can make our sentences use sound more informal is if we use slang as well. So we'll never use slang in a formal context. Pause here and read through the examples of sentences that are formal and informal based on the vocabulary they're using. Another thing that affects the register of a sentence are contractions. Formal language does not use contractions. Informal language is allowed to. A contraction is when we put two words together to make one. For example, odd, what's, mustn't, where, your, haven't. They're putting two words together. So in informal language, you're allowed to use these. In formal language, we do not. Question tags can also be used to make a sentence sound more informal. Tags are questions added to a clause to encourage the listener to respond. For example, you're joking, aren't you? He's from Yancey, isn't he? Pass me a pen, will you? You're ready, yeah? So those tags at the end of the sentence, they make a sentence more informal, and they're really good to use in dialogue as well when we get to that point. The tag changes it from a sentence, a statement, to a question. Informal language is also allowed to break grammar rules. So often when we're talking, we don't adhere strictly to the rules of grammar. All right, for example, can't keep going, too tired. All right, I haven't used I haven't used the correct grammar rules here. If I was talking or writing in a formal context, I'd need to have those grammar rules. I'd need to meet them. All right, for example, unfortunately, I cannot keep going as I find myself too tired. So pause here. I'd like you to read through this. All right, so formal and informal vocabulary in Percy Jackson. Much of the language in Percy Jackson, much of the dialogue is informal. I'd like you to have a look at these examples of informal sentences and see if just speaking them aloud you can change them into more formal language.